Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in-house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. Today's episode is a little different, and I'm really excited to be sharing it with you for the podcast. Instead of my normal interviews, where I'm the one asking the questions, today's interview is taken from an event that I attended last month, hosted by my good friend James Mitra at JBM Consulting. Now, for those of you who don't know, JBM are an executive search firm that places top talent into high-growth tech firms, fintechs, and consultancies. They are also the talent partner to the fintech-focused private equity firm Motive Partners, which is where the event that you're about to listen to was held. When James told me about the event and told me who was going to be speaking, I said that we had to record it for the podcast because I knew it was going to be a great interview, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Now, before I share who that guest is, although if you're listening to this on your podcast app, you've probably guessed from the title, I wanted to just answer the question that some of you might be thinking, which is, why are you getting a guest from outside of the consulting industry on a consulting podcast? I am a big believer that you can and you should learn from the best, regardless of their field, because you can learn a lot from how people have achieved in other areas that you can bring in to help improve your consulting business or your own consulting career. And as you'll hear in today's interview, there are so many fantastic insights that are shared that are equally applicable to consulting firms and your clients as they are to today's guest's specific industry. So who is it? Who was James interviewing? Who are you about to hear from? The person that James was speaking to on the night was Iain Martin, former managing director of Moonpig. Now, for those of you who are listening to this from outside of the UK, and you might not have heard of Moonpig, or for those of you who live in the UK but haven't watched television for the last 10 years, Moonpig are the UK's largest online card retailer, with over 15 million cards sent through their online platform in 2017 alone. Simply put, they are the Google of personalised cards in the UK. If you want to send a personalised card, they are the place you will go. Iain was one of the early members of the Moonpig team, and over his time as MD grew the business from just 8 people turning over £2 million to a team of over 160 turning over £60 million a year. This phenomenal growth ultimately led to Moonpig being acquired by Photobox for 120 million in 2011. James and Iain cover some really interesting topics in this conversation and the Q&A that follows, including Iain's unorthodox approach to becoming the MD of Moonpig, the importance of using data when it comes to your marketing, and how using data helped Moonpig achieve its rapid growth, how Iain and the team ensured they hired the best talent for the business, and their unconventional approach to rewarding their team. The sale, as I know a number of you are interested in hearing about, more about how people exit their businesses, the sale to Photobox and the steps that they took from deciding when was the right time to sell through to integrating the business with their new owners and all of the challenges that they faced throughout that journey. And the one that I know many of you will want to know, how did they decide on the name Moonpig and where did that famous jingle come from? It was great to meet Iain at the event, and I really enjoyed hearing his story and his advice for those looking to grow their businesses as successfully as he did. So without further ado, please enjoy today's episode with Iain Martin.
For those of you that don't know Moonpig, I think probably everyone does. If you're like me, Moonpig, I'm a loyal consumer. Normally when I've forgotten an important birthday or anniversary or something last minute, but Iain was fundamental to the success of Moonpig, and we thought it would be awesome to have a chat with him now, for him to share some insights on his career, tell some stories, and then open it to the floor for some questions. So, Iain, thanks very much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I guess I wanted to start with, you've had a very varied career, and I know it's an interesting beginning, and I think you joined Moonpig in 2006, is that right?
2006.
There we go.
Yeah.
Love to learn a bit more about that early part of your career.
Okay, so it's anything but linear, really. So I studied mechanical engineering at Brighton, and I then went into research for a couple of years doing vibration analysis. It's obvious. And then I took the next logical career move, which was to go to a small giftware retail business called More Balls Than Most. I don't think anybody's in the room is actually old enough to remember it, but it was the company that invented 3 juggling balls in a box that were then sold millions and millions of times. A tremendously exciting sort of business, a lot of anarchy around it, and we went fantastically bust. Having, sold to Marks and Spencers and WH Smiths and everything. So we wanted to teach the world to juggle. So that had gone pear-shaped. So I then went and joined a plastics and rubber manufacturing business, because that was an obvious move, for about 6 months before deciding that actually I should go and join Marks and Spencers. So I went and joined Marks and Spencers as a technologist, initially in packaging, and then I moved into the buying departments and did stationery, toys and gifts, which is the first time I got into sort of stationery buying. So that was very sort of logical. And then and I had a great time at Marks and Spencers. It's really where I cut my teeth on retail and consumers and all that sort of, fashion, all those sort of interesting things that I still love today. If you cut me in half, I'm still green and gold, I think. So I jumped ship, actually. I'd been in for about 5 years, and I'd got involved in Marks and Spencer's emerging tech sort of special interest group, and I'd spent some time at MIT in Boston, the Media Lab, looking at emerging technologies, and this was around the time of the dawn of tech, and GPS. They had trainers that knew where they were going and things, and I got terribly excited by all this. And then I was offered a startup business that Hallmark were one of my suppliers at Marks and Spencers. Were starting a business around WAP. Do you remember WAP? Does anybody remember WAP? It was probably the worst marketed technology ever. Effectively, it was mobile internet, and everybody was talking about WAP. So I thought I'd go and do some WAP. So I joined this startup business and did about 3-4 years of that, doing mobile messaging. And then Hallmark decided that we were running video on Nokia 7210s. Do you remember the phone in the Matrix?
Snake 2.
Yeah, the Matrix phone. We were running video on those phones, which was fantastic, but nobody was ever going to buy it because there weren't enough people who had those phones. So we were well ahead of the curve, and eventually Hallmark shelved that. So I then ended up back at Hallmark HQ supplying Marks and Spencers with stationery gifts. And I did that for too long. That was a bad move. And eventually I decided I needed to get out and I needed to get back to tech. And I was in a card business. I wanted to get back to tech. I Googled, who's doing tech with cards. And this little business called Moonpig popped up. being run by a guy called Nick Jenkins, who you've probably all seen on Dragon's Den, etc. And Nick, I wrote to Nick and I said, I think what you're doing is interesting. I want to get into tech. I'm in cards. Can I come and have a cup of coffee? And he said, you can, but I haven't got any jobs because I think I'm just about to go bust. And I went and had a cup of coffee with Nick and we got on really well. We kept in touch for about a year. And then he came back to me and said, you know what, I think I've turned the corner. We're just about to make a little bit of profit this year. Do you want to come and have another conversation? And so Nick and I decided that, I'd join, and I sat next to him for a year just so that he could check that I wasn't a twit, in his words. And we decided from before I joined, we decided that I would sit next to him for a year. If I wasn't a twit, he'd make me MD, and we'd run it for another 3 years, sell it. He could go to the beach and I'd be left to look after the business afterwards. And that was the plan, really, that we discussed, which I thought was great and he thought was great. And that's pretty much what we did. It took us a little bit longer, as these things do, but it was a lesson really in taking control of your own career. I think when we talk about JBM and about recruiting, I was talking earlier, there's 2 times in my life where I've actually taken control and said, right, I'm going to write to someone rather than go to a recruitment agency. I've just said, I like that business, I want to work for them. And those have probably been the 2 best jobs I've ever done, actually.
I'm doing us out of a job there, Iain. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Sorry about that.
No, I respect that massively.
I wasn't briefed on that.
No, fair enough.
We'll come on to recruitment.
Yeah, we will come on
later.
to that. Yes, thank you. No, it's and I think fortune favours the brave, right? And clearly that's something that nothing ventured, nothing gained, and it certainly worked out. So, what was it like when you got there? What was Moonpig in the early days?
Yeah, it was small. Nick had done the hard yards. Nick really had done the hard yards. The time when, the overheads were 10 times the earnings for the first few years. So he'd done 5 years to get it to break even. So I joined, and we had a factory in that industrial heartland of Chelsea. We had a tiny little office in Chelsea, and we sat upstairs, and downstairs another little office with the printer and customer services and dispatch. And then we used to rush the cards to the post office. There was about a dozen people. We were turning over 1.8 million, I think, and just about breaking even.
Awesome. So clearly
not
as glamorous in the beginning, but over the next sort of 5 years, it probably really started to kick on. So what was that next phase like?
So I think where the business was, it had been growing slowly, and the first thing was the product was really good. So the idea of, Nick had always been really irritated by the fact that you send a card with a joke on it to somebody, and the name is the wrong name. So the joke's implied, and it just really irritated him. He used to tip exit out and write the name in. And so the timing was right for that problem to be solved, albeit what seemed like a small problem. But you change that name, and suddenly the card becomes thoughtful, and it becomes meaningful, and it becomes much, much funnier. And effectively we sell jokes for a living, and so that was really a good piece of tech. The product was right. The second thing really, and this was my first year was spent introducing TV as advertising. And I suspect that as my coffin disappears off this planet and the curtains pull, I shall hear those 4 lovely notes of the Moonpig jingle. I suspect it will follow me to the grave. But we were looking really for a scalable acquisition route. So we knew the product was right. We knew that when we got a customer, they told their friends, or they sent cards to people, and those people became customers. But it just wasn't fast enough. It was taking too long. So we needed a scalable acquisition route. And I wish I could say that TV was my idea, but it wasn't actually. It was one of our competitors went on TV. We only had one competitor at the time. It was a company called Remind for You. We've subsequently gone under, but it was run by, or part of the team was Carol Vorderman. And suddenly this TV advert turned up. We hadn't even considered TV at that time. And suddenly there was this Remind for You were advertising greeting cards on TV, which everybody had thought was mad. Why would you advertise a greeting card on TV? Now, I was doing one thing right at that time, which was I was monitoring the competition, and Remind for You had sequential order numbers on their orders, and I was ordering from them every week and plotting it on a graph so I could see how they were doing. So when I saw them come up on TV, I started ordering every day. We were sending cards to friends, relatives, and everything. Tell us what the number is, So they didn't spot us doing it, but we actually plotted their orders every single day for the entire length of the TV campaign. And from that, I was able to do the maths. And Moonpig is fanatical about data, real data, stuff that means stuff. And from those measurements, we were able to sort of approximate how many new customers they got from their TV spend. And we went and found out how much they spent on TV, and so we had a cost per acquisition. And from that cost per acquisition, I knew from our lifetime value calculations that actually that was not a mile away from interesting for us. So that really triggered us to go look at TV, which is a bit of a problem because none of us in the team at the time had ever made a TV advert. So it's like, oh, who's going to do that then? And Nick went, I'm not doing it, you do it. So off I went to make a TV advert, and I found a really good creative agency, and I found a media buying agency, and I resisted every single temptation I could to get involved, and just said, "Look, you guys know what you're doing."
I can see the Apprentice episode.
It is just like that, where you've got to find the people that are right to do the ads. The only thing I did say was when we were using a storyboard, which was around the Bewitched ad. Do you remember Bewitched, the TV show Bewitched?
Yeah.
That was one of the storyboards we had in the first Moonpig ad. It was like, because there was a lot of that 1950s graphics on cards. And so we were saying, well, we should take the cards really to the customers. And that whole kind of magic, Tabitha's nose twitching and sparkles. If you go back and look at the very first Moonpig ad, it's got a lot of that in it. It was on the storyboard. And I can remember the meeting where the director, a guy called Tom Chalice, said to me, look, he said, jingles are really passé at the moment and nobody's doing them. But I think with this 50s thing, I think it might hold a jingle. What do you think? And I'm so glad I said yes, because I think it was the Marmite factor with that ad, that really made the difference. It was also, nobody on the board saw the ad until the Friday before it was airing on the Monday, right? Nobody, not even Nick, right? And I showed it to the board on the Friday, and I have to say it's the worst weekend of my entire career because it marmited the board, and we had half the board demanding A, that we pulled it, B, that my head was on the block, and what on earth had I done, and what was this jingle thing, and was I taking the piss? Was this serious? And Nick, bless him, was an absolute fan from day one, as were some of the other board members, but it divvied it down the middle, so it was pretty scary. So
amazing.
So that really was the trigger for the growth. That was our customer acquisition. That was what made it really accelerate. And we started off with a very small amount of spend, and we grew that spend. Moonpig now spends probably more than 10, 12 million a year on TV still, and it's been self-financing. We've never had to go get money for it. Nice. So it's a very fast turnaround and a very decent way of marketing.
And I guess these days it's not just cards, is it? So when did that next stage of its evolution come in, and why?
So we were very good at saying no to stuff. So we wanted to get into, well, some people wanted us to get into gifts very early on. It would have been a very natural thing. But we used to have a saying, which is we don't want to have a warehouse full of remote controlled helicopters. And I think if we'd got into it too early, then we would have had. We wanted to take the high ground. We are the card supplier. We're the number one personalised card supplier. So we advertised on TV for quite a while. We then started thinking about the proposition, and you start off from a tech perspective saying, well, we do personalised things, so let's do personalised T-shirts and personalised mugs and personalised this. And it becomes a bit commoditised. Actually, if you take it back to the customer and you say, what is the customer getting from us? They're getting a birthday card. So what can we put with a birthday card that makes sense? And actually, for 50% of the well, probably more than 50%, I quite like flowers as well. But certainly for buying flowers for people on their birthday is a great add-on. So we started a flower business. The MVP was pretty poor. It was let's try and get flowers through a letterbox, which never works well because they're not the right shape to get through a letterbox. But we tried squashing a few dodgy chrysanthemums into a box. It was pretty horrific. But it gave us an insight that people did actually want flowers because they bought them and complained about them. So we then found a decent flower supplier, and flowers are now a multi-million-pound business for Moonpig. Probably, well, when I left, we were third in the UK for courier flowers, behind Interflora and Marks and Spencer's. Probably, it might even be bigger than that now. It's not a business to go into lightly. Valentine's Day, I can remember the week before Valentine's Day, sitting there thinking, I've booked and committed to 1.2 million roses. and it's a week before Valentine's Day, and they are still on the bush in Kenya.
Oh my God.
So it's an amazing process, right? Sometime between Christmas and New Year, you trim all those bushes, all those roses, doesn't matter what stage they're at, you trim them all between Christmas and New Year. It takes 48 days for the roses. How do we get roses all at the same time? That's how it happens, right? So you then go in the week before Valentine's Day, you harvest the whole lot, you've got to chemically treat them, reduce the temperature, get them into refrigerated containers. We had to pay the lorry drivers extra money to get them to the airport. They get to the airport, they're in refrigerated containers, they go to Rotterdam, they're made up into bouquets, they're driven through the tunnel, they're taken to our factory, and they have to go with the right card. And then we give them to the delivery guys.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It's a logistical nightmare. So it was hard, but it was worth it. It's a big business, but it's not one to go into easily.
Amazing. No, I mean, I guess a part of it, and I guess JBM doing what we do, I'm interested in the story about the team. So how did that come about? What was the team like in the early days, and how did you kind of build that over time?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that the team did everything. So it was a really high performing team, and I was blessed with a really, really good team. In the early days, I'm not quite sure. I think we probably had a lot of luck in terms of the first few hires. But as you start to develop a team around you, your sort of management team, and you realise that it's a really good management team, we started to get more and more protective about who we let in, frankly. And so I used the team to recruit their peers a lot. So it was a kind of a collaborative process. You could expect 3 or 4 interviews to get anywhere. You could expect a maths test and an English test. Nobody does that anymore. We kept hiring people and they couldn't add up. It was a nightmare. So maths and English tests, and we had different levels depending on what roles you were going for. We'd set real problems for people to solve. Again, people just don't do that at interviews. I can remember recruiting an FD and setting a task around, look, we found this acquisition channel, we want to spend £1 million on it tomorrow. What questions are you going to ask? And most of the candidates just had no idea, And the one candidate that came in and answered it properly was the one that we hired. So we invested a lot of time in recruiting.
I remember you telling me when we first met, slightly different incentivization of the team than maybe other businesses. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, again, I think we liked being different. It's good to be different, and it's good to challenge the norm. So bonuses and annual reviews, and is there anyone from HR here, or from HR businesses? Bonuses and annual reviews, and HR actually. I'm not really that keen on any of them. That's not really true. But bonuses, I think, in companies can be very divisive. It's always really difficult to set them up. I'd worked for Marks and Spencer and Hallmark, who had big schemes, and generally speaking, what happens is they come up with a whole load of metrics, which is just crazy. And then you go through the year and some good stuff happens and some shit stuff happens, and you go to your review, and if you've done all right, you'll get 70% of your bonus, right? It's kind of 70-80% of your bonus. It's kind of standard. So we did away with that. And we said, well, actually, because there's a whole load of process and documentation, and you come away from it feeling like, why didn't I get 80% or 90%? We did away with that, and we recruited people. The expectation was that they would be brilliant. Okay, so we would say to people at interview, you're joining a brilliant team and you're going to be brilliant. And so my expectation is I will pay you 100% of your bonus, right? So we turned bonuses upside down. So my expectation is you earn 100% of the bonus. If you don't earn 100% of your bonus, you should be concerned. You should be really concerned. So we flipped it completely. Most of my team, or pretty much all of my team, earned 100% of their bonus every year. It's the same in financial measures, if you work out the sums, if you just balance it. It's completely different in terms of emotionally what it means to people. And we all know that when you're working in teams, people are on the team or they're not. If they're not, we'd ding their bonus or we'd exit them. We did lose some people, but generally speaking, the retention rates for the first 5 years were about 2%. Was the churn rate of staff. And, when other businesses, I talked to other businesses at 30%, So we flipped it, upside down bonuses. And it worked. The other thing was that the corrective measure, if you didn't give 100% of bonuses, people's faces dropped. They were like, oh, what have we done? Annual reviews we didn't do. We did weekly one-to-ones. Every manager spent an hour with every member of staff every week. The main problem with that is how many meeting rooms you need as you grow. And we had to build loads of two-person meeting rooms as we grew, because by the time we got to 160, 200 people, that's a lot of meetings. But every person had a weekly one-to-one with their manager, which means it's constantly being assessed. You're constantly talking. It's an investment in communication. It's a good thing because it means people actually do less. But what they do is understood and been communicated and talked about, and so it's a good use of time, but it's a big commitment.
Interesting. And you alluded there to, I guess, the size that maybe it got to over a period of time. And I think in 2011 you sold for a fair amount of money.
We
was
did.
it 120 million? I guess there's probably people in this room that may have been through fundraising processes or are interested in that. Can you tell us a bit about your experience of that whole sort of process?
Yeah, so the sale process took a long time. There was a sort of a 6-month warming up period, I guess, where we were getting our stuff together with our bankers. And to some degree, we were well prepped. And it's something that I guess everybody can do from day one if you're in startups. We had, it's very nerdy this, but we were absolutely anal about our filing system. We had a filing system that was like really, really tight. Every contract was in the contracts folder. So we had all of our paperwork. Every metric for marketing was in the marketing folder. We had data coming out of our ears, but it was all really, really organised. So it was quite easy from that perspective to prep for the presentation. The actual presentation of the business, the key thing is deciding when to start. When is the business at its most frothy, i.e. there's still something left in the business for the acquirer, but you're going to get maximum value for it. So it was a fair bit of discussion about that. We then pitched to myself and my finance director, a guy called Paul Lansbury, who did an awful lot of the legwork. We pitched to 26 people, minimum half a day each pitch. Some of those pitches went for a day, and some of them that we then followed up on would go 3 or 4 days. So in total, it took 6 months just to get to a position where we had somebody that we wanted to work with, and then there was probably another 3 months of legals and bits and pieces. So it was really enjoyable, actually, in a painful sort of sadistic kind of way, but it was masochistic way. But it was an enjoyable process, made easier by the fact we were organised before we started, I think.
Yeah, and I guess you did something that not everyone does. You stuck around. So talk us through that, because you were there for quite a few more years post-sale.
Yeah, I stayed for another 4 years after the sale. So it was a change culturally, because we joined together with the Photobox group, was how the sale had occurred. So suddenly there was Moonpig and Photobox, and very quickly afterwards we were in the same building. 2 very different businesses, different cultures. Photobox was much better at sales, actually. They were much more of a sales culture. Our business was a bit, more creative, I guess, and a bit softer and a bit more, well, they didn't like our upside down bonuses for starters. That was not traditional. So there were a few things that kind of culturally changed. Our business was, Moonpig. One of the things I'm really proud of is that it was actually the majority of my management team were women, and a lot of them were mums who were working on shortened hours. It's a fantastic pool resource to tap into, and not enough companies do, which is why I like it, because you get to hire really, really good, smart people just for the sake of working 35 hours rather than 40. A little bit of flexibility goes a long way. But so we had this sort of really nice kind of balanced, collaborative team, and the Photobox team was much more salesy. There was a lot of drive and a lot of passion. And I think we learned from them and they learned from us, but it was a challenge. And then VCs as well. We'd gone from private ownership to 6 VCs, which initially was going to scare me. It was like, oh, I've heard things about VCs. Are they VCs? No. Okay. Heard things about VCs. But I have to say that the investment team that worked with us were brilliant. They were so supportive. And I ended up, one of the things, if you've got VCs are full of really smart people, right? And what I think a lot of startups and businesses don't do is use that, actually. right? So we went to our lead investor. I was looking at the gifting business, and I wanted somebody to do like really good market analysis and, tell me what's happening in that market. Now, if anybody knows how to do that well, it's a VC, because it's what they do. They spend all their time looking at markets and analysing markets and trying to understand where the opportunities are in markets. So we actually pulled in, help from our lead investors and got them to do some of the legwork for us. And it was really successful. It was really good projects. And so we had really good experience with VCs. They were great.
Good stuff.
Not what you always hear, is it?
No, I was going to say, no,
there
definitely
you go.
not. And what prompted the decision? So you've lived 10 years of your life pretty much.
Yeah.
You're taking it from just about turning a profit to exiting and then staying on for that next period. What made you go, and what must have been a tough decision?
Yeah. It was and it wasn't. I think, there was an incentive for me to stay a period of time, and that incentive had kind of run out. But also I think the business had grown to a size where I couldn't really get my arms around it. It was becoming an enterprise business, and that's not really my own sweet spot. I think I'm happier when I've got a really close connection with the team, and that's kind of, so it got a bit big for me, really. So yeah, I was ready to leave, but it was difficult. It was, it's a big part of my life.
Yeah, definitely. Wow,
Something
amazing
I'm proud of.
story. And what have you been up to since then?
Since then, I took a bit of time off, actually, which was quite nice. And I've done a little bit. I did some interim work, so I've done a couple of interim roles. I was because my career is logically sort of linear. I did some work with Sarah Beanie on Tepalo, the online estate agency, and then I've just finished 10 months at an AI business, BioBeats, which looks at mental health using biometrics. It's just moved to Oxford University now. It's a really exciting field and business. So I've done a few bits and pieces. I've also taken the opportunity to start a family. So I've got a little baby now, which is rather nice. Better late than never, but she's rather sweet. So I had the luxury of spending a year with her. Her first year I was pretty much at home the whole time, which was fabulous. So she's now 2. And I'm just starting now to think, do you know what? Actually, I've done a little bit of non-exec work as well. Sorry, I'm chairman of a business in my first years, although I'm going to wrap that up at Christmas, I think, and look to another executive role, because I'm starting to, I'm itchy feet to get another team, I think, or to build another team, because that, I think, is what really excites me.
Yeah, because Iain and I had a conversation maybe 6-9 months ago, and things were. I didn't think you were going to go back to it, and then it sounds like something is cropped up that
something's
might
bubbling
tempt
under
you back.
that I'm looking, that I'm looking at. So yeah,
exciting,
maybe.
Great stuff. Well, it's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. I guess we wanted to put it to the floor really, in case anyone had any questions for Iain. Anything you wanted to know? Go on, Lucas.
One question. Lucas Verker, Blacklight Advisory. I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that transition when you guys merged with the other organization.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of culture development in financial services around how to improve your culture, what's going on within the organization.
Yeah.
I mean, mergers and acquisitions are the painful ones. What made it difficult, and how did you guys bridge that?
Well, I've got to say, the first thing is when they bought us, they knew that we were a good business. They weren't buying us because we were failing business that they wanted to turn around. So that context is important. And, to their credit, first 18 months, they did nothing. They were hands off. It was like, you don't muck this up. Let the guys get on. Let them do their thing. Let them deliver what they've said they're going to deliver. And we were delivering. And so there was really not much interference at all. When we moved the offices together, that became a bit more difficult, and there was a sort of a process of, we put production together, made sense, right? And then this is another reason why I left, really, because I was really doing myself out of a job, so I'd had everything, and then we put production together into a group function with a group production director, and then we put finance together, and then we started to merge other areas of the business, and that was where I guess there wasn't really any sort of major fallouts. I actually think. Might be blowing my own trumpet a bit, but I actually think that the Moonpig influence on the photo box was really welcomed. I think they'd been under so much pressure because their product was slightly more commoditized. They're in a really competitive sector. They've been under so much pressure that they found, working with Moonpig, that they could actually start to express themselves slightly differently and behave slightly differently. And it brought all sorts of questions about culture up. We did some work with on the senior team, we did some work around behaviours and strengths, and so we invested quite a lot into that. It was quite funny, actually. We did a thing called Strength Scope, where you go to all the managers and you look at, what are their characteristic strengths. And my team were really funny because we all got sort of, there's about 35, 40 strengths sort of things. It might be critical thinking or strategic thinking or whatever, and you get your little wheel with your strengths on it. And we said as a team, well, what we'll do is we'll overlay them all and see what we look like as a team, and then we'll compare that to the Photoballs team. We look very, very different. But the really funny thing was that my team, out of 35 things, there was one that we scored 0 for, which was results driven. We scored 0. 9 in my management team, we scored 0 on results driven, which was really interesting. Where we scored highly, our max was collaboration, and the second highest was empathy, which is not a term you hear a lot in sort of management talk today. But if you're in a fast-growing business, then empathy as a strength. When you're bouncing it off the walls, trying to grow, and there's all sorts of chaos and difficulties in a fast-growing business, that empathy was really strong. So the Photobox side were much more results-driven. And so there was that sort of interesting differences of dynamics, which needed to be unpicked. So I would say do the work to understand it and unpick it and have all those conversations.
So thank you. Any other questions? Wow. Ladies first.
What should we, thank you so much, it's been super interesting. What has been probably the hardest decision you ever had to make regarding people?
Good question.
That's a stinker.
You can go to another question in the meantime, think about it.
I think there have been occasions where people have, I've made some failures in hiring, and which you're going to make if you're going to hire that many people in that period of time. And sometimes it's really hard because you hire people who are really, really good, and they're great people, but they just don't fit. And it's not personal, and it's not because they're not great. It's just because the hole you're trying to put that person into, or the team around them, the chemistry is not quite right, and they're bouncing off each other, or there are stresses or whatever. And if you can, a lot of businesses would put up with it, but we had kind of a zero tolerance on it. And it was just, we were so precious about it. I still see the team. It's been 3.5 years, and we were out for drinks last week, right? And we're all in different businesses now. It's a really tight team, and we're really protective of one another. And so there were some really tough calls I had to make on hiring and letting people go, or having those tough conversations. But you have to take your medicine early. If you don't take your medicine early, then it will fester, and and suddenly your brilliant team, a year down the line, will be falling apart. People will leave, and so you have to make some really tough calls on that. I think sometimes I find them tough because these are all people I like. Hire them in the first place.
Yeah, it's that common saying: hire slow, fire fast. Which
Never that easy. Never that easy.
Thanks, Green. Nelson, we'll kind of work our way down.
Yeah,
Do you want to go next?
thank you for sharing your stories. It's so fascinating. Is there anything that you'd do differently in hindsight?
Oh God, loads. No, I think there's
Not the jingle.
Well, I don't. Yeah, well, is there anything, any sort of macro thing that I would do differently?
It's interesting you mentioned earlier on in your career you stayed too long, and you wish you'd make the
Yes.
a bit quicker.
Yeah, from a career perspective, I definitely think that taking control of your career at an earlier stage is good. I made a mistake. I moved customer services into my production area. So one of the things that I was very keen on was having customer services. Well, I wasn't initially. We had customer service in the office, and then we moved the factory. We built a new factory, and I moved customer services to sit in the factory. And within 2 weeks, we hired new people and everything. And within 2 weeks, I just knew it was wrong. You just go, oh, what have I done? Oh no, this is a nightmare. And stuck with it for about a month, and then just said, this is not going to work. So we brought it back, We moved offices and we put customer services in the middle of the room, sitting down the middle of the room, and we all sat around. So marketing, tech, myself, finance, we sat around customer services. So we could hear the conversation with the customer. And this comes from, when I worked at Marks and Spencer's, you were encouraged, you needed to go to stores once a week, minimum. It doesn't matter which store, you go to stores once a week, you talk to customers. They still do that to this day. And I got to a digital business and I'm like, well, where's the customer? Where's the voice of the customer in this business? So we sat them in the middle of the room. They're still there. So we could hear the conversations, And I used to wind my CTO up and say, hey, you've spent £100,000 on a bloody system to tell us when the thing's gone down, and I'm getting it from the phone call first. What's going on?
Yeah.
So that was a mistake. Putting customer services outside earshot was probably the big one. That's one. There were lots.
Yeah. Thank you.
The jingle is just, the name is just as iconic as the jingle.
Yes.
Quite different at the time.
Yeah.
How did you come up with Moonpig?
Well, I didn't. Nick was obviously the founder, and he came up with it initially. He was looking for, so at the time, he was looking for something that was easy to pronounce, not misspellable, that couldn't be misspelt, and that there was 0 Google searches for. Okay, and he spent 4 days on this and looking for something that was easy and put all sorts of words together. Unfortunately, it had to be Moonpig. And Moonpig, I say unfortunately because he didn't want it to be Moonpig initially, because that was his nickname at school.
No.
Okay. And he didn't want it to be that, but everything else just turned up blank, and Moonpig, there were no searches for. And obviously in the early days, you couldn't bid on people's brand terms. Google changed the rules on that. But so it was one of those things, Moonpig, you can't misspell it. It's phonetic. Nobody, the only reason you would type in, it was great from a marketing perspective because if people came direct to the URL, then you attribute them to another marketing channel, right? Because nobody types in Moonpig accidentally, right? It's just, so if we were personalised cards, then it might personalisedcards.com. Our marketing metrics would have been a lot more difficult to unpick. But yeah, it was his nickname.
How did you get his nickname?
I don't know. He won't tell me. He won't tell me. I don't know, but it's served him well.
Yeah. Jake, do you have a question?
Hi. So I work at Go Compare in their strategy investments team. So we're also no stranger to Marmite jingle, but just giving you part of the thing that we look at, we work with our marketing team a lot, and we're still constantly trying to optimize our other channels.
Yep.
You've obviously built the business in an era when all these new channels emerged at once.
Yeah.
Facebook and the various social ones. How did you, I guess, on one side, staff appropriately for that? And given you were so data focused, you must have loved that. You must have loved that. Oh, now you can measure TV vaguely, and you somehow managed.
We managed. So it's interesting. So when we start, to be honest, the social thing the lid hadn't blown off the top of the social back in 2006. Really, it was only just starting. And the first thing I did when I got to Moonpig was stop the affiliate marketing completely, turn it off, because there were only 2 people in the marketing team, and one of them was doing affiliate marketing, and it was only accounting for 5% of the customers. So we just turned it off, which everybody said we were mad. This was heresy. This was, you can't do that. I said, well, we were just going to do it. So we did it. And we did something else. But we were, on the data side, we used exit surveys. Obviously, some measurements we could get empirically from Google search or whatever, and other data we took from exit surveys, and then we had a balancing equation, and we did all sorts of, we built our own little attribution model. That got more and more sophisticated to the point where we could be running 3 TV ads, and I could tell you for any particular ad running a month, how many months I was going to return gross margin against that ad, specific ad. So we got quite sophisticated, really, and sort of blending the lifetime value of different customers, whether it's card customers, gift customers, flower customers, we could actually do that. So we got quite into it, really. Staffing, it just kind of grew over time, really. We added it in as it made sense. We never had enough people, you just never do. But we focused on making sure that we weren't just, I think there's a tendency to say we've got to be doing everything. You know, oh, you've got to be doing Twitter, you've got to be doing Facebook, you've got to be doing this. And we just didn't do it until we had the resources and the measurements in place to do it, which, you know, caused frustrations. But there's just no point in spending another marketing pound if you don't know what it's going to give you, because you're just going to build a problem for yourself and you're going to end up in trouble.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Iain. I think everyone's thirsty and ready for food, but that was brilliant. Thank you so much for your insights and time, and thank you everyone for the questions.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Climb in Consulting podcast. If you did, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast platform of choice, whichever one you may be using. And please also share this with anyone that you think could benefit from hearing today's interview. If you want to get in touch or give me any feedback about the podcast, please feel free to drop me an email. It's nick@climbinconsulting.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.